us giving individuals 6 or 7 minute speeches. So, you know, if I say something stupid, which is very likely to occur, I expect somebody to say, that's, you know, I don't agree with that, and that's going to be the power of this, you know, process. If we just all give 6 or 7 minute speeches and sit back, then we're not going to get very much out of this. It'll look good when we make the slides, but it's not going to be as useful to the planning process as we think it is. And people around this table represent such a, you know, wide perspective on this community. It would be a shame if we were sitting here trying to plan for the year 400 and not really get what you think about what the community ought to be and what we've done good and bad. And the only way to do that is to have some dialogue as we try to address the topics that were raised in the questions that were sent to you. So while you've been assigned these primarily, I suspect all of us might have some thoughts on those, and I hope we get those on the table.
What is the order for? Or being able to comment?
George, the moderator, will.
We don't want to just break in on something.
I would like to.
General conversation.
Yeah, like a general conversation. When
you just say, get your attention, and then you would bring us in when you could.
that'll be fine. That'll be fine.
Then we could say, Charlie, did you bring the candy?
We can say, Charlie.
Already asked.
I really do.
It's obvious.
We'll have
Already
plates.
asked him that, he said no.
Mr. Moderator, as Ann will tell you, and others that know me, I very seldom work from anything prepared. I usually do it off the cuff.
I'm congratulating you when I laugh. You do a wonderful job, I think.
But I usually do it after I've thought through what I plan to say. But today I've got something written. So I'm going to...
Good.
You have something written on a piece of paper?
On a piece of paper, and I'm going to read this.
Relative to housing.
Charlie, I can hardly stand it.
I know it. I know it. I don't know if I can read it or not. If it's all right, sir. Shall I begin?
Let me give a little
The intro.
Okay. Are we all ready to go now?
Wendell's got his coat on.
And we're going to plumbing back there.
I really know good work.
You notice Wendell's, everything's matched up on Wendell. He's got to be really sharp.
I swear.
I bet you did.
Go, George.
Probably all.
Okay, we ready? I'd like to express our appreciation for all of you ladies and gentlemen gathering here this afternoon to participate in a process as part and parcel of the Hampton's strategic planning process and the culminating activity for the 375th anniversary celebration. It's seldom that we can get this kind of brain thrust in one roof at the same time. We're highly appreciative of you taking time from your respectively busy schedules and participating in this activity today. We want to express appreciation to Thomas Nelson for allowing us to use that particular facility. As I mentioned, this occasion is the culmination of the 375th anniversary celebration and the initiation of the city's strategic planning process. We have selected some questions to facilitate the discussion this afternoon, and in that process, I'd like to direct the first question to the former mayor, Mr. Werner. And Mr. Werner, that question relates to housing. Hampton's housing situation is a concern, has always been a concern of yours, and you have cited a need for better matching of housing types to the market and preserving the existing housing. Would you like to expand on this issue or to offer some explanation on that issue as a policy of yours?
The subject matter, housing, by itself is not too difficult to respond to, but the total subject matter is a huge challenge. And with that, I would like to present to the group here today an overview. With that, I will begin. From a historical perspective, Hampton has for the last 50 years been blessed or cursed, whichever way you see it, with types of governance style which have fluctuated from benign to caretaker to activists. An occasional administration has set us back. We are currently in another activist stage where great things are proposed, and I believe great things can be done. Throughout this period of time, we have done something that few other communities have achieved. we have fostered and maintained a rapport between the black and white communities, which I think is the envy of a lot of our neighboring cities and cities throughout the state. Certainly this effort should continue. All of us know how this was accomplished, and I hope our efforts in this regard will be rewarded in the future as they have been in the past. The 12 categories of issues that are identified for Hampton cover almost all of the subjects which can be productively addressed in a session such as this. Obviously, economic development has parity with the racial relations to which I have just alluded. I am sure each of us has a particular concern, and these will be developed as we discuss our prospects for 1985 and beyond. You've certainly posed some interesting questions, Mr. Wallace. What would I do if I were the sole trustee of $20 million to benefit the city of Hampton? I would certainly take part of it and do whatever I could to more firmly anchor the rest of the city to the downtown section. A city without a core center is a city adrift. Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, and perhaps even Newport News lack a true core, which we still have in Hampton. Granted, it has not reached the dreams we had 20 years ago, but I believe it's on the way, and every effort should be made to expand the downtown even more vibrant, to make it even more vibrant and vibrant. Certainly, downtown parking is critical. Our neighboring city of Norfolk anticipates progress and builds parking ahead of what it considers it to be its needs, and their expectations are being fulfilled. We should immediately go to deck parking in the areas of downtown Hampton. If we show that much confidence in downtown, I think the business community will follow. We may wish to put a cap on office space on the street level in order to increase retail space. I'm not quite sure how we could do this, but it is certainly something to think about, as we have already spent considerable money on Queensway, and the retail business will make this pay off. We should do everything possible to encourage more housing, whose residents would be directed to the downtown area. We should encourage the merchants and perhaps even help them in their appeal to the military populations at Langley and Monroe, because they have significant buying power. I would use another portion of the $20 million to, if possible, leverage loans to those homeowners desiring to bring their homes into code compliance. This would wipe out some of our substandard housing and make the entire city more attractive. I would very definitely, I would very definitely not seek additional public housing, as I believe that the city has demonstrated their concern for low-income housing, and new programs and ideas need to be tried. Another portion of the $20 million would be used to promote the city, but promotion of the city alone is not sufficient. We should become a participant in an effort to promote the whole area. If our sister city, Newport News, doesn't wish to join us, then we should go forward anyway with those who are promoting the south side of Hampton Roads, if a productive arrangement can be worked out. The recent bickering between Newport News and Hampton is self-destructive, and if we can't get along with our neighbor to the west, then we should look south for allies in the economic and cultural growth of our area. And at this time I would strengthen that statement by saying the greatest thing that the city of Hampton has going in economic development today is the new Hampton Industrial Park. And we must do all that is possible to stop the flow of new companies and industrial operations from moving to Newport News. Hampton Industrial Park will help us accomplish this. What's special about Hampton? Its people. This amalgamation of black and white who have done so much in the past and hold so much promise for the future. Our special problems are lack of land, economic and industrial growth. Our constant, or so it seemed, problems with Newport News, which often seem childish to me, and a shortage of money to do a lot of things which should and could be done. Our special resources are our waterfront, our people working together, and our innovative approach to some of the problems of the past, such as the way we have progressed in redevelopment in downtown Hampton compared with the approach taken in Newport News. If we are to continue to grow, we must reach out to many of the young people, the lawyers, the businessmen who are establishing themselves in this community. Unfortunately, many of our leaders are getting a little long in the age bracket. We need new and younger blood to reinvigorate the ideas of some of the older leaders on whom we now lean so hard.
Mr. Werner, when you speak of new leadership, new invigoration, how do you how do you see that relating to Phoebus, where we're contemplating doing something new relative to revitalizing that area in terms of a commercial district or some housing or some combination of the two?
That's a good question, Mr. Wallace, and I think it's going to be a combination of both. Our new emphasis on business, of course, and then to bring the people back into Phoebus with new housing starts. And I think some of our younger people in the various phases of the business world are needed in order to carry forth and continue the ideas that have been put before us. And I go back to the early days of the administration of Hank Kilgore, when things were on the move. And I think today we are all revitalized to an extent that we are now picking up once again into a new time of growth in our city of Hampton.
Well, let me direct this question to the group. Mr. Werner mentioned something previously early in his discussion. He mentioned the feasibility or the possibility of a $20 million endowment. Here's a situation I'd like you all to grapple with a little bit in terms of your own way. Let's assume that each of you were the individual designated as a trustee for $20 million that was left to the city of Hampton. And you, as that trustee, had the sole power, the sole decision-making authority in terms of how that $20 million endowment would be utilized for the benefit of Hampton. Suppose you were that trustee, Mr. Johnson, how would you relate to that particular situation in terms of using it for the benefit of Hampton?
Well, if I had the $20 million and I had the authority to spend it on the city of Hampton, I believe that I would use that money totally for improvements to encourage economic development, additional business, and in doing that, I would do all the roads, all the facilities necessary to serve those businesses. The sewers, water, roads, and what have you, to do that. And knowing what things cost right now, I think $20 million could be put into that very easily, and you would still not do everything necessary to improve conditions for business. I'm talking about retail business, industry, and research and development types of organizations, so that I think that would be my number one priority right off if I only had $20 million to spend.
So in essence, you're directed primarily towards the infrastructure kinds of things.
That's
Those
right.
things are not glamorous, those things are not seen, but necessary.
The things that are hard to spend money for because you don't see the immediate results, but in the long run, all you have to do is to look at some of the areas that have been developed in the past that we didn't spend much money, but we gained an awful lot for it.
How would anybody else respond to the $20 million trustee role?
Well, if I may, I have a tendency to share that same position and look at some of the initial questions that were posed. My thoughts were that infrastructure is basic to economic development. If you don't have it, the economic development just does not occur. There are two things that have to be in place before you can develop any type of a program of economic betterment. And those things relate to access to properties, which is primarily roads. You have to have those. The other thing is sewer, that is sanitary sewer and drainage. If those two things are not in place, three things actually: sanitary sewer, storm drainage sewer, and road systems. If they're not in place, economic development will not occur. You can trace the economic development of this community, and you will find that wherever sewer systems were in place, the economic development and the development generally occurred around those facilities. You can almost map, and I can point to several instances where school buildings located in an area that needed sewer, those sewers were put in, and immediately around it, economic development began to occur. That is, various types of economic development, housing and what have you. So I think infrastructure, relative to the $20 million, or relative to any other question you want to address in the question of the growth of the community, has related itself to infrastructure. They have to be in place, and I think a plan that puts them in place is going to guarantee that the economic development will follow.
Ms. Gilmore, you started to say something?
Well, I think when you look at $20 million, you think it's a tremendous amount of money, and it isn't when you begin to spend it on any of these things. But I think there are two sides you can look at. They've addressed themselves to the physical needs in the city, and I think that's imperative. I think the priority will remain better economic development, and as Tom said, with sewers and roads in place, then you will have a better chance at that. And I think we need to be very careful to keep the road system developed, or we'll bottle ourselves up in many other ways. But I also think there's some human needs that we never have the money to really do things with. One of the things I think we need in this city, above almost anything else in human needs, is a school for gifted children. Because if we don't address ourselves to those children who are outstandingly bright, you know, somebody's going to find a cure for cancer, and we've got to have children prepared to enter into those fields that are so important. I think we have a great problem now with daycare, not just daycare for little children, but after-school daycare. And I think we have a myriad of problems from children who are by themselves at home, and I think that's a problem. And the third thing I think is the care for the elderly that is available in a community. And I'm not talking about about our government supporting this. It can be self-sustaining, but people need places for daycare, for elderly citizens. They need a lot of things in that area that we don't provide facilities for. And as I say, I don't mean that we would pay to maintain all these, but I think we need those in the community. So I'd have a struggle between the physical and the human needs.
Mr. White is a former city manager who's currently city manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. He brings a different perspective. So if you were that trustee, how would you respond to this situation?
Well, I gathered that just like any other gift, your $20 million was like a gift. And so if I had that opportunity to evaluate what I would do with that gift, I believe I would get together with community leaders and find out what things we wanted that might generate some economic activity, at the same time enrich the spirit, such as a fine arts center or a convention center. And I would hold my $20 million up after I got a good idea of what I wanted. Heard Mr. Wernham say that we have a core beginning for a city. I might say that I wanted my investment in and around that core that is there. And I would hold my $20 million up to the world and say, here's $20 million, and invite some developers to come in and tell me how they would match up with that $20 million to get me the things that I kind of want as seed money for a greater investment. I believe I'd let the infrastructure needs be identified, but only in connection with the thrust of bringing more bucks into the economy and enriching the community.
Anyone else would like to address that situation? No?
I did have another thought on that. When I first saw that question, I thought it would be good to take that money and set it in trust for old tired former city manager.
Agreed.
But old mayor.
Mayors too.
In order to get it for me, I might be able to share it.
Old mayors don't have retirement plan.
And they've never earned much money, have they?
They just fade away.
Yeah, that's right, we just fade away, that's exactly right. I would like to say, George, that I think the window of perception is right on target. In line with when some of that 20 million in hand as a gift, it would certainly have made that deal sweeter. We're lucky in this case that we were able to use federal funds to sweeten the deal. So we need more of that.
George, can I play the devil's advocate?
By all means.
I have to disagree with Charlie and Wendell a little bit about downtown. Downtown does not have sufficient land to ever develop it again into a core section of the city. There's just not enough land there to do it unless you tear down all those apartments and take in additional residential properties. Therefore, I think emphasis on downtown should be as a special district, because it'll never be anything more than that. Specialty shops in the downtown area, and some specialty types of restaurants and entertainment. But there's insufficient room, and Ms. Kilgore knows that we tried to get big department stores interested, but you just couldn't get them interested. There's not sufficient room there. And so I would take the area that is going to end up being the central core of the city, regardless of what anybody wants to do, and that's the Mercury Coliseum Drive area, and work in every way possible to build that into the core part of the city, and not let too many residential developments encroach on that. I'm afraid right now that it's being encroached on a little bit too much. Keep enough land there so that it can really be the business center of the city of Hampton.
In that context, Mr. O'Neill, the current city manager, the Hampton waterfront project is being pursued rather vigorously. Mr. Werner mentioned the Radisson Hotel that we're doing there. What do you contemplate evolving there in the next few years, and how do you perceive that's going to be, or when do you perceive that will be a success, and what will take place that will let you know that what you contemplate doing is a success?
Well, I think there's a physical answer to that in terms of when the development will be done, but I think more importantly and more hard to define is when you've accomplished the objectives, and that is some of the things that were mentioned in terms of the kind of the quality of life and the environment and the sense of community in the center of a core that was mentioned in some of the earlier answers. There's no question that once that the hotel and the office building that are currently in the final planning stages and will be under construction in the next 3 or 4 months will be a significant impetus to the development in downtown, and certainly utilizing the waterfront as the amenity that I think we all think it is. The next phases of that will be to take that, the kind of the public access and the public waterfront along from Healy Park to Bridge Street, and incorporating hopefully a marketplace kind of concept that invites people to come to the waterfront to look at the seafood industry in its basic orientation. That is the uniqueness of our history, and it's one of the few places with good access to interstates and others that people can come and actually look at a dead rise, a scallop boat, a fishing fleet in actual operation, and to do it in an environment that is very pleasant. And so those phases will be done. I think we'll know when the physical part of it's done. But like, as simple as the things that we were doing in Mill Point Park, it is the spirit of the people and the excitement that's generated about that development. And we did something as simple as invite people to a party on Friday afternoon and get 3,000 to 5,000 people downtown, or a Bay Days. Then you start to see that economic development pay off, and that's what really you've been successful. I don't think, however, we're going to be successful in downtown until we address some of the things that are on the periphery. I think Mr. Johnson's correct in the sense that in some places you don't have any core. We're very fortunate. We have the potential for 4 major cores of activity in the city. We have Old Hampton along the waterfront and in what would be a special district, as Mr. Johnson described. The second is in Phoebus. We have the opportunity to turn the Mallory Street exit of the interstate into a real opportunity to work with the Phoebus Improvement League to do something that makes that a 19th century business district that cannot be replicated anywhere in Hampton Roads. The third area is Mercury Central. And I'll stop at Magruder Boulevard with Mercury Central, but we've already tried to do some things to make sure that the mix between commercial and residential in that area is appropriate and reflects the kind of central business core, both retail and commercial, that I think we all think it should be. The last area is the area very much where we sit now, and this is along the Magruder Boulevard between the Butler Farm and Hardy Cash, the New Hampton Road Center. And we have a chance to turn that into the next generation of jobs, the next 8,000 to 10,000 new jobs created in the community, for it to be a residential, not residential, but a campus-style research and development park that will be reflective of the kind of environment that NASA and the new electron beam accelerator and the kinds of things that are now being done in the shipyard. So we have an opportunity to do those kinds of things. But our downtown work and some of the work that we're going to do is not going to be successful until we can deal with some of the physical appearance questions that surround each of those core areas. Until we can do something in the area of King Street in LaSalle, for instance, an area that borders very close to the downtown. We're spending millions of dollars in downtown, and we have some of the more unsightly parts of Hampton right adjacent to it. We have some of that potential in the areas of Mercury Central, along the retail corridor. We have to deal with the environment around that if we expect ever to have that to be the kind of place that I think we all expect it to be, and to be the kind of generators of activity. But we're fortunate we have many opportunities to do that. We don't have kind of our eggs all in one basket of a downtown, and it's either successful or not, and the rest of it runs to the suburbs. At least our destiny is in our own hands.
I'm more interested in the comment than I am in the name, but let me just say that whether it's Haley's, Hallie's, or Hawley's, and I understand that a descendant of Edwin Hawley says it's Hawley. Joe Haley was a great friend of mine, and that park is named for him. I know it looks like Healy, but it's pronounced Haley.
Stand corrected.
Okay.
I'm sure that's not going to live on very long. It will be a Healy when nobody remembers, but I still remember.
I still call it Haley.
Yeah.
I think the park will be gone when the
I think
development.
you're right.
We've been talking about some elements of economic development for Hampton in terms of the various segments of that economic development process. Again, I want to call on Mr. White's experiences as city manager of Hampton and now city manager in Charlotte, North Carolina, a city of considerable larger size than our own. I would ask to get your impression in terms of the economic development activities here, as you've heard, and the kinds of economic activity development in Charlotte, compare and contrast those somewhat.
All right. Without being presumptuous, let me try to describe what I see as the advantages that Charlotte has, and then think in terms of this area as well. Charlotte is strategically located. As you go down through the eastern section of the United States, you go from Boston to New York to Philadelphia to Washington to Richmond to Charlotte to Atlanta. It's a nice location for development, and so it's developed into quite a regional center of commerce and trade. The airport in Charlotte is a great advantage. It is owned and operated by the city, and so we have a lot of control in seeing to it that the airport is competitive with other communities. As a matter of fact, only a few days ago we approved another $110 million of investments in the airport to ensure that we will be competitive with some of the other cities as we see as our competitors. We have ample water resources, and we control our water. The water department is a department of the city. Same way with sewerage. In the way of transportation, it probably as much as anything else is similar to what we would experience here in Hampton in Tidewater. It is becoming very, very difficult, and it's a problem that is a national problem in the cities. We spend our money in the interstate systems, but we have not dealt with the urban transportation problem. So what I have described in terms of a place to attract business and industry, it's got a tradition and it's got a strong business climate. It's very diversified in terms of the base of the economy, and so it has its strengths. As I now think in terms of Hampton, it seems to me that while you should think in terms of Hampton in a selfish way, controlling the destiny of Hampton, even to include various areas of Hampton, making sure that there's good balance. There needs to be, I think, some mechanism for dealing with the regional issues, and I would not say how that should be, but it's been a question and an issue that all the time I was in Hampton we struggled with, and the competition that is not good competition among the communities in Tidewater has cost us, in my opinion. I'm very proud of the things that we accomplished in Hampton in building a coliseum, and investing in our airport, and other facilities that have regional appeal. But I flew into the Norfolk Airport today, and there is a Norfolk Coliseum, and there are other areas that give me a little bit of concern that seem to be are regional in scope. So you need to develop some kind of strategy for dealing with regional needs in order to make the subunits attractive, as well as concentrate on what's appealing about Hampton and what is appealing about Hampton. I frankly think that the leadership in Hampton, I know that everyone says our people are our greatest asset. I'm at a distance now, I can look back and say that I truly believe that that is the case, that there is and will be continuing good political leadership and community leadership, and you have a history of honest and efficient local government. And so that, in my opinion, those two elements are there and in place. The water is a tremendous asset, as Bob has been speaking of, as a way of enhancing the downtown community. Maybe that's where I would use my $20 million in the marketplace and other facilities to exploit that. And while it is an asset, the way the waterfront has been gobbled up by the government and by schools and private sector housing, it also represents a boundary. And how you overcome that and exploit that, I don't know. But I think it's both a blessing and a curse. But I would concentrate on the positive parts of your advantages and go for it.
I think that in the years to come, in dealing with economic development, we've never had a satisfactory arrangement for that, nor for tourism on a basis of cooperation on this side, and I think we're going to have to come to a regional approach to those things as well as some others. And I think there's a great probability that in the next 20 years or 25 years that we'll see a council of governments established in all of Hampton Roads, where we keep our local government and take care of all the problems of the locality. But I think until we have something like that council of governments, nobody's really going to feel committed to a regional approach. And I believe that we will see that happen, and I think we'll see that it will be a good working arrangement for the Hampton Roads cities.
I agree that it's going to have to be legislated. It'll never voluntarily
That's right. And until we are putting some money into that council of governments, and until it's that way, then nobody feels the same commitment. Because, you know, we had the area-wide cooperation group, and the only thing we really accomplished was uniform voting laws. And I don't think that changed the world a great deal. But that was an attempt. But there was no money put into that, and there was no real tangible commitment. And I think until we have that, and I believe that if the Hampton Roads area worked on projects, really worked together, there's no limit to what we could accomplish.
We've evolved into kind of a regionalism kind of approach. Mayor Montague, do you have any thoughts in that regard relative to regionalism?
Well, several of the assets that Wendell mentioned, Charlotte having, these things that belong to the city and the city can control. One of the very important ones around here is fresh water. The extraordinary fact in Virginia is that a city can own a regional resource. I think that is clearly wrong, how many times have we been threatened by a neighboring city to the west with the differentially increased water rates and that sort of thing? That's absolutely wrong. And as you say, Ed, it's not going to happen voluntarily, but I think the state's got to take that away from Norfolk and from Newport News and all the other cities that have their own waterworks and put that on a regional basis where it will be fairly applied to the benefit of all. No more could we own Hampton Roads or own that segment of the interstate that passes through our city. I mean, it's preposterous. So that's in the same category. Now, of course, there'd have to be some consideration paid for it.
I thought about saying spend the $20 million on the water system, but that wouldn't buy but 2 or 3 spigots.
I'm afraid you're right. And we could, as Wendell said, we could spend $20 million building a nice municipal pier. So
Yeah.
$20 million is not a whole lot.
You didn't give us enough money.
That's right. We need some inflation on it.
200 million, and then I could play with it.
Got serious.
Wendell?
Well, I was approaching that subject gingerly, but I think that the Tidewater region is similar in many respects to what I see.
Now we call it Hampton Roads one. Don't say Tidewater anymore.
Yeah, don't say
That's
that.
passe.
As I was saying about the Hampton Roads area, there are similar, when you look at population, when you look at markets and all the rest, very similar to what I see in other major regions. What needs to be done, of course, is develop a way of controlling your destiny in partnership with all the Tidewater communities. Water has been mentioned, and I felt very strongly about that. I didn't feel it was my place to say that, but flying back in and seeing the community, in terms of our own resources inside of the City Hall of Charlotte, I can call on, in depth, quite a number of people to help me when we have a problem to solve. Here, each city manager calls on good talent, but there's a limit. And so some of that talent to deal with recognized regional issues, if it were collected together, would be tremendous in your advantage. As it is now, it represents not an asset.
I think when we see the tunnel between Newport News and the Portsmouth side completed, we'll see such a movement of people through Tidewater. It won't make any difference where you live or where you work, that I think the need for this council of governments, or whatever you call it, is going to become more and more apparent. And as David was speaking of the water, every problem is going to become more critical, and we're going to have to find solutions to it.
But when you speak of a council of government, that brings up the issue about the responsiveness of a government to its particular constituents.
Well, the responsiveness of a council of governments is to each of the city councils, through them to the people. And I think the responsiveness can be just as great, because those councils, who all stand for election by the people, you know, are going to be, they're going to be concerned with what the council of governments is doing. And I don't need to go in now to how you would elect the council of governments and that sort of thing. But I'm just saying there has to be some kind of an organization or a formation of something that people have a commitment to more than we do now. The Futures Committee is working very hard to try to bring about all these things we talk about, but nobody's committed to that who has any of the purse strings to do any of the things they're talking about.
As Andy said, once the new tunnel's through, what News to Portsmouth is completed, then the circle is finished.
Yes, and we are circled.
We become one closely knit unit.
And people, for example, in the Washington area drive that far to work every day back and forth out of the district into Virginia and Maryland, so it isn't a great distance. You can get anywhere in Hampton Roads in less than an hour probably, you know.
In a half hour, you can almost get
You
the
can,
first
that's
one
right.
over.
I only wish that we could begin this forward movement by annexing Newport News.
I'd like,
As a matter of fact,
But, you know,
I
it's
think
funny.
there's a very serious comment. Again, being off the distance, why not? First, you put together some configuration, enough strength and clout here. Maybe you start with the coast, I don't know. But there needs to be some combinations, maybe some first steps.
Some mergers, integration.
Well, you know,
Some integration.
have always been opposed to consolidation with the city of Newport News, Because I think we have two entirely different approaches to things, and I never thought it would be as satisfactory. But I'd be the first to support a regional council that could deal with the problems that we
I
have.
would too.
And you certainly wouldn't deal with problems that are,
Couldn't both be first.
or couldn't, you wouldn't deal with problems that the local community is supposed to deal with, but they stand there very clearly in my mind, the things they could
I can
do.
give you an example. Back years ago, the problem came up about the airport. Well, whether I had any vision or not, it turned out to be that way, just as I said. I told council or some members that were pushing to get the money to put into the airport. I said that airport will never be anything but a little feeder airport. If we're going to put money in the airport, we ought to get together with the region and build a real airport, you see. That time there was feeling that Norfolk couldn't expand, and they have expanded considerably since then. But I was afraid I was going to lose my job because I suggested that. And that's the trouble with local officials trying to broaden this issue out. And I agree with Ms. Kilgore that some council of governments responsible for some of the area-wide things, everything from like the Hampton Road Sanitation Commission,
Waste
airports,
disposal.
waste disposal, regional waste disposal on to the garbage level. And some of those things could be handled very well on a regional basis. And I would first recommend that this side, say, Pecos and Newport News and Hampton, get together and form some type of regional type of
Yeah, we're gonna work that way.
overtop government.
I
And
think you gotta go for the 7
I
cities.
agree.
and
I would never be in favor of consolidation with Newport News because if they couldn't run things, it would never happen to begin with.
Well, there's another thought about the airport. I've heard expressed that people are concerned that the Norfolk airport will eventually be boxed in. And if we keep selling property at the airport to keep it surviving, there won't be enough land that it might really become the primary airport one of these days because of the restrictions in Norfolk. But we keep selling off the land, and it won't be any better than Norfolk is. I've heard a lot of discussion of that.
No,
Go ahead. I was just getting ready to comment on this question of regional government. To my knowledge, based on some of the experiences I've had and things that I've read throughout the nation, most regional governments today have no good track records.
I'll have to agree with that.
They just do not function
That doesn't mean
properly.
it couldn't, though.
No, that's a fine dream, but it's just somewhere out in the future, and I don't think it's going to occur in any short period of time unless you can get real leaders in the community. And the Hampton Roads committee that's now put together to try to do that is probably a first step along that line. But that's a long way off, and I don't think it's going to occur in the next 10, 15, perhaps 20 years. Maybe after the turn of the century, those things might occur by virtue of some technical situation that brings that about, whether we like it or not. But let me comment on something else that has to do with region, which I think is very important, and one we constantly seem to overlook because we're so close to it, and that's the port facilities. We're what we are today because of our location relative to the Hampton Roads and as it relates to the port facilities. If it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't be in existence at all. You can trace history back to its very origin, and that's the reason why we're here. Hampton, I might venture, has no waterfront. Let me explain that. Hampton has no waterfront that is readily able to develop into any type of major economic resource. It has, in its relative sense, some capability to develop the downtown area into a water-oriented type location, which says because of the water, certain types of things might wish to locate there, i.e. Radisson hotels and other facilities that relate themselves to the water, marinas and things of that sort. The fishing industry as such is pretty much passé in Hampton as a major industry. And technological advances have brought that about, i.e. refrigeration, transportation in general. Port landings are important, but they're not necessary to the processing of seafoods. So you can locate them in many different things. It is nice to have it, so the tourists that come here can look at it and say, gee, here's the seafood industry and look what's bustling. And if you can develop that in such a way that it becomes a tourist attraction, then fine. But we have no waterfront unless you're willing to spend literally hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars to develop port-oriented facilities. We don't have them. So let's relate ourselves to the moment of who does have them. Norfolk, Portsmouth, Newport News does have those facilities, and any spin-offs that you get from that relative to our own economic development in our industrial park is important to attend to. That is, you better relate that industrial park to what's going to happen to our port facilities in the general area so that we can be in a position to capitalize on that. Let me point out something else that's already been mentioned here, but I don't think in its scope is fully understood. One of the best resources we have, man-made resources, is the interstate and the host circumferential road that's been put in to accommodate that. And where does it start? It starts in this community. And where does it end? It ends in this community. It circles the entire Tidewater area and comes right back into this city. You better relate very seriously the transportation system relative to that road network and what that means as it relates to port facilities. If you do, then you're going to find out if you can store in your mind, or rather project from your mind, the kind of things that are going to be needed relative to that transportation system, i.e. the road network. And the modes of transportation that might very well lend itself. Primarily at this time, it's going to be truck transportation. And I suspect that rails are not going to be important, but air transportation relative to that is going to be very important. If you don't believe it, look at the new wind tunnel they just built over here. And the capability of that wind tunnel is to test an airplane 4 to 5 times the size of the 747. That's a big airplane.
They can't land it, no.
They can land on the waterways. And that's exactly what Howard Hughes tries to do with his Spruce Goose. He realized, and that's a bigger airplane than the 747, he realized that to carry the load, you could not build a landing strip big enough to carry. But you can build a flying boat big enough. Now that's kind of far-fetched when you mention it on the surface, but the possibilities are there, and all you got to do is ask NASA if that can happen, and they're going to tell you, yes, it can. So you got that capability relative to that. But in the short run, that is, in the next 20 years of the turn of the century, you're going to find that land type of vehicles, rubber-tired vehicles, on our highways is going to be your chief transportation means. And the access to this area by virtue of the interstate is your best single resource, and you'd better relate everything you're doing to that resource. I think that's important, to keep in mind and advance materialistically relative to your economic development.
I'll just say one more thing about the Council of Governments, and Tom's right that some of them have had a bad track record. But I think we've reached the point in local government in Virginia that we are getting the people who just want to maintain the status quo are fading out of the picture, I think. And the people who are coming in now are younger, and they have the area-wide concept in their minds much more clearly than people of my generation did. And I think when you have people of vision who are willing to take risks, that things can work, and that's my hope for that.
I think it will be forced by economic reasons. I don't think that it will happen, otherwise. The money reason causes things more than any other reason there is.
Yeah.
Let me pick up on what Mr. Johnson just said. The question was, what have I learned and what could benefit Hampton? And I went through a list of important assets that are controlled in Charlotte, but I would say, unfortunately, you do not control in Hampton. And in order to see your great potential, you need to somehow, I'm sure that no one will hear about this, but take them over from inside. You need to develop a mechanism of some kind that gives this community a voice in those regional assets that are important in order to ensure a good economic future. That's the way I see it. I don't know how you do it, and I'm not suggesting at all that you give up the spatial, wonderful assets and personality of this community.
speaking of economic future, Mayor Easton, you have indicated that the Hampton Road Center is going to be the future for the economic development aspects of Hampton. Do you want to expound or elaborate on that particular stage a little bit for us?
Thank you. Apologize, I'm late. I understand that Mr. Warnham has already given a first written speech in his life here. Covered the, got all the answers here, so.
That's impressive.
I would appreciate you asking the question. I think very much that the Magruder area is somewhat of our future. I think that we have an opportunity to do in Magruder, maybe to look at some of the things that have taken place in the past that maybe we would like to sort of change or maybe redo that obviously we can't. And so I think that we have a chance to do in Magruder everything that we would like to do. And I think that we have proceeded along really that course. City administration the last several years has worked very, very hard in doing a number of things that I think are really indicative of our commitment. We've worked extremely hard in acquiring the land, really over 3 years, and hopefully now we've acquired that. In the last couple of years, we put a great deal of effort into trying to move the state into finalizing its plans for the East-West Expressway. And it seems like we're now over that hurdle. We've done a lot relative to looking at what we want in the land, in that industrial park. And I compliment really our staffs the last 2 or 3 years in doing this. We have picked out, basically what we've said is that we're not really happy in using anything on the peninsula right now as a standard or as a guide to what we want to eventually end up with in the Magruder area. And consequently, our staff has traveled to other parts of the state and really through the southeast to really see what is the best. And that's sort of what we have done to set our standards. And in conjunction with that, we have already passed some development covenants that I think are fairly revolutionary, at least in the peninsula area. Several months ago, we passed a sign ordinance for Magruder Boulevard that is certainly revolutionary. And so, and we focused on the other things that are going to make it good, the educational, using this Thomas Nelson and then the New Horizons, and hopefully our efforts to ODU graduate engineering program. We're very close, I think, to making a significant announcement about a major wellness center in this area. And all of our research tells us that that's what businesses want. They want all the amenities. They want a nice campus-like setting. They want the amenities. We're very close, hopefully, to finalizing plans for a major golf course in this area, which would again be a significant attraction and amenity to the business environment. So I think we're on the right track, and I believe that our biggest problem in that regard now is to sort of hold steady, and I know this is going to sound strange for me, but to not lose patience with our movement here, and
Somebody write that one down. You got that on tape?
but to keep our patience and know that we have really all the people sitting at this table have had really some input to where we are now in various efforts. And so we need to realize that we're on the right track. We need to realize that it's going to take a little patience to now see the things coming, and really to keep our standards high. And I believe that we're going to end up with something in this area that's going to be really something that we all be very, very proud of.
But you've led me into a situation to a question I'd like to address to the group that would probably very much stimulate their interest. What do you perceive to be special about Hampton? What are the special kinds of problems that we may have? What are the special opportunities or assets that we may have that we can utilize in projecting our future?
As far as what is special about Hampton?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we always talk about pride and being proud of our community, but I'm not sure that every other community in America is also very proud of its own community. So I think we have to go really beyond that. And I'm not downplaying. I think Hamptonians are very proud of their community, and that has been an asset. But I don't necessarily think that is something that distinguishes us from any other community. I think that what distinguishes us and that we really should play on is our heritage, and the fact that we do have things that have gone on in Hampton that nobody else can say that they've had. And we have tried to bring that to light during the 375th anniversary year, and I would like to see us build on it from a standpoint of maybe increasing that pride level among our citizens, and also to really reflect on our heritage and what it stands for, and use it as a guide to setting our course for the future.
In addition to Jimmy's statement there, I think that we in the city of Hampton are small enough, but yet large enough to attack the problems of the future growth in the city as the years go by. And I never will forget the time when we opened the Coliseum, and I was seated beside an undersecretary of State, undersecretary of someone from Washington, D.C., and he said, who owns this Coliseum? I said, the city of Hampton. And he said, how large is your city? I said, oh, well, 125,000 people. And you built this Coliseum, this big structure? So you see, our boundaries are unlimited. With the right viewpoint and the new period of motivation has returned, I think we can accomplish the things we need to make Hampton still a better place to live.
With George, let me say this, following up on what the mayor said. He was talking about pride. I think the greatest thing we had in this city, and that lady there had